everyone, my name is Nathan Kolb and I want to welcome you to today's Credit Safe webinar. As always, we are glad to have you and hope that you will join in this discussion that we are going to have today. We're going to be talking about trends in business closure and business bankruptcy, what's going on, how things are going. I mean, this is a topic that is relevant and being talked about all over, from the international summits that are going on right now to the Fed chairman press conference yesterday to around family dinner tables and everything. People are talking about this. So we have some data that we want to discuss and some different things, and we want to do that. And to do that, we have brought in a familiar face now. He's been here a couple of times to those that are regulars for our webinars, in Richard Gleed. And he is a hybrid business and technology executive with more than 15 years experience in the business information industry. He's led global teams through periods of dramatic people, process, and technology changes, and has spent the last 10 years focusing on delivering innovative and robust data solutions to both internal and external customers for Credit Safe through the use of cutting-edge technologies. So he is definitely the man that we want to have speaking about this and talking about this from a data perspective. I know Richard's been working with his team to get all the pieces and parts together for this, and I'm just excited to have him here with us. So Richard, thanks for coming, and looking forward to what you're going to share with us today.
Okay, thanks for having me, Nathan. I was a bit at the start then. I was like thinking, try saying that 10 times fast. I know the job description, job title probably needs a bit of working on, as it doesn't exactly fall off the tongue really. But thanks for having me.
That's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're going to kind of jump straight into it in a minute. I'm going to share.
Absolutely. Yeah. Jump right in. I know you've got a bunch of data to share with us and everything, so please feel free, just jump on in.
So yeah, this presentation, as Nathan mentioned, we want it to be as interactive as possible. Today, we're focusing on US business closures and bankruptcies, the trends of recent. And we've got one then coming shortly for international. So as we said, we want it to be interactive. So I've got two questions. You can pop the answers into the Q&A section. And as Nathan mentioned, we'll kind of review and bring those up when appropriate. The first question is, how has your business been affected by the pandemic? That'll come clear later why I'm asking that. But and also this one hopefully will as well. What products and information would be useful to your company currently? You know, when we're talking about business closures and bankruptcy information. But then I'll jump into my first slide really. So I think you can all read here, but I will talk it through. As you can see, companies in 2020, we've had 30% less bankruptcies in 2020. And obviously the reason I put this up here is to gain the reaction, which I'm expecting of. That cannot be true. It is actually true, but I'll speak more about this shortly. And really, we can see here that it has dropped by 30%, the number of bankruptcies, but that's split into non-business and business. You also notice I don't have 2021 on there. I won't have that on there at the moment, but I will talk about it in future because it's not a full year, so it's not really comparable, but I do have some statistics I'll be talking about later on that. You know, so when we look at the business compared 2020 to 2019, you can see really it is very small difference. It's only a 5% drop, but that's still kind of not what we would be, you know, expecting. We expect that we've gone through a pandemic. All we're hearing is businesses are closing. You would kind of expect for bankruptcies to have increased. And I'll go into that a little bit more later. We can also see that personal bankruptcies have decreased as well. We do know that those non-business figures always do contain businesses as well. It's what typically is happening there, though, is that the company that goes bankrupt, the individual is also declaring bankruptcy. So it gets then declared, you know, typically if you're a smaller company, you would be classed as a non-business really. But that does also include personal bankruptcies as well. So I was expecting the reaction. The reason I put it up there is, we know that 30% hasn't, but this is the lowest figure we've had since 1986. I did mention 2021 as well. Based upon what we're seeing at the moment, we're actually predicting or forecasting that there's going to be around 17 to 18,000 bankruptcies this year. Which, WIM's, again, not expecting it. Our natural reaction is for it to be more. There's more companies closing. So then I want to kind of talk about why do we think that they have dropped? And there's not a single answer for this. There's multiple reasons, support from the government being the biggest one, I would say. The Paycheck Protection Program, that clearly was meant to keep businesses from going out of business, and companies which typically would have gone out of business previously have been given assistance which have stopped them from going into bankruptcy. Another thing would be, the government provided the ability to furlough staff and for them to be supported where companies would not have furloughed staff previously. Maybe because they wanted to look after their staff, try and keep things going, or because of their negative effects to reputation. That became commonplace now. And, with regards to that, that was, commonplace that people were reducing staff, which meant their operating costs were less and they were able to continue trading, really. Another reason was that there was limited access to courts. We are seeing that there's still around 15% of courts are closed or at limited access. Obviously for a few months last year, they were completely closed. And that meant that maybe companies who would have filed for bankruptcy were unable to. So that would be another reason. We've also got the companies are just using their reserves. So maybe companies which, could be suffering are using those reserves, and, we don't know what the future will hold. We don't know if they will then declare bankruptcy later in these years. The other reasons we've got here, I'm just going to scroll down my notes, apologies, is we have something called bankruptcy lag. This is been seen in other events previously. The Great Recession back in 2007. We saw back then that we didn't see an immediate spike. They basically continue to escalate for about 3 years more until they peaked in 2010 before starting to reduce again. So we could be seeing something, it's not something we haven't seen before. We could be experiencing a lag between the bankruptcies before we start to see these increase, really. Something, worth mentioning, what we have seen when you look at public companies and the larger private companies, their bankruptcies are at a high for the last 10 years. I will be providing the links to all of my, reference material. Nathan will do a great job, I'm sure, of providing that. But yeah, those larger companies are, they're used to navigating around the bankruptcy process. They're, experienced with that. An example of this would be JCPenney's. They entered into bankruptcy last year. As we all know, they haven't closed their doors, but they are in bankruptcy procedures to, manage their debt, restructure, and they should, or they're hoping, obviously, to come out of that stronger, really.
Yeah, and for anybody that, just to interrupt you here for 1 second, Richard, for anybody that's wondering about those or wants a little bit more on that, we did do a webinar Tuesday, which you'll be able to get, that's about the domino effect of bankruptcies, and we go over the different types of bankruptcies and some of the stuff. We have a couple of videos about that I'll link to and everything like that, so that you can see these different things, which is leading to this of bankruptcies
Yes.
not quite actually being filed or being filed in a various way that may not show up on this in what Richard's talking about.
You're stealing my thunder here, Nathan.
Well,
I was just setting them up really here. So yeah, I think I can see also it's very distracting because I'm looking in lots of different directions. So apologies for that. But I can see that, we are obviously alluding to that who's been hardest hit in these recent times, and it is small businesses. And small businesses, we typically know, are not filing for bankruptcy. If you just look at those figures we're seeing there, we know that, in 2019, before pandemic, that, more than 23,000 companies are ceasing to exist. So typically what we're seeing, and this is where I want to kind of go in the next part of the conversation, is that companies are just closing their doors without filing for bankruptcy protection. And that's very common in the US. But before I want to talk about that, I do want to kind of go over some of the trends that we're seeing here. The graph or the table you can see on the left, which says state and total number of bankruptcies, that is just the total number by state. Not really very useful information. Okay, the biggest states and the states with the largest concentration of companies are typically going to have the largest amounts of bankruptcies. But if I then divide that on the right by the number of companies in there, you can see it ranks that a little bit differently. So you can see I've given the top 10 of, by filing numbers, and then by a percentage of companies going bankrupt versus the number of companies in those states. And then underneath that, I've then put the number of bankruptcies and put in the top 10 industry codes at 2-digit SIC, most affected. Again, I'll be providing Nathan with all of these so you can have a look at this information in a bit more detail. But I don't think there's any really surprises there. Eating and drinking places at number 1. We know that there's been a lot of industries affected. I think the one thing I think here, which kind of shocks people, is seeing health services so high. The reason for that is everybody thinks that all the health services were doing fantastically during these times, but obviously health services is quite broad. That covers, all kinds of health services, which were not maybe seen as essential health services. So those were negatively affected, maybe weren't able to survive running at lower capacity than usual, really. All right. So we talked about bankruptcies, and what I want to now talk about is obviously the difference between a bankruptcy and a closure, which, bankruptcy is pretty factual. The courts you have to file information at the courts. That generally is distributed to all of us. We have something factual feeds from those courts, which are updated daily, which keep us informed of those major corporations and things like that going bankrupt. But as I said before, the majority of smaller companies are not filing for bankruptcy. So we can rely on various sources of information to try and work out whether a business is still operating. What I would say is this is less of an exact science, really. We look at Secretary of State data. The first thing when a company closes isn't ring the Secretary of State and update their status. So there tends to be typically a bit of lag there until they're due to renew their registration there, and then it may go inactive. But we also take other feeds such as social media. But again, we can't use that as factual information. Just somebody saying that a business is closed, it needs to be vetted. We need to use the manual investigations underneath it to ensure that that is actually the case before changing a company's status. Trade payment data, a sudden drop off in trade for that company could indicate that it's closed. Obviously, invoices becoming unpaid for long periods of time indicates that a business is either in trouble or is potentially closed. So we use that information. We're heavily reliant on that. We also do checks on things like companies' URLs. We use postal information to see if that building is vacant as per the postal service. But again, with a phone number changing, they could have moved addresses. With the URL becoming unresponsive, They could have just shut down their website or changed it to another one. So these are not factual indicators. We, of course, as well monitor the media where you have something high profile or something in the news where it says that they've closed, and that they still, again, may not have entered bankruptcy proceedings yet, really. So the difference with a business closure to a bankruptcy is very factual. I can give you hard facts and tell you it's decreased by this amount. Business closures is less so. I did a lot of research over the last year, and really, the more you dig into this, what I would say is the more that you find conflicting information. But I've picked a few sources today for this, and obviously using CreditSafe's data as well, on people who I think have done a really good job on producing some information which is quite reliable, really. Typically, what companies are doing with regards to the closure statistics is they are surveying a sample of companies. The report I've chosen is actually created by Facebook and the Small Business Roundtable. Again, Nathan will provide that link afterwards. It's definitely worth a read, and it's probably the best one that I've seen recently. But yeah, they are dealing in samples and surveys, so they're only so reliable, really. So I think have a look at this, and I'll delve into some of the stats that we've got as well here.
And just to interrupt you real quick, Richard, as we're going through here, folks, just a reminder too, we have a couple of answers for the questions that Richard had asked at the beginning. If you could, keep answering those, and he can repeat those again. And then if you have any questions as we're going, we've had a couple that I've been able to answer. But if you have questions that you want Richard to answer, drop them in that Q&A as well, and we'll get those as he's going here, get you answers to all these different things, because I know there's a lot of stuff that's coming up that there are a lot of questions around. So we want to make sure that we have that dialogue going back and forth. So Richard, if you would just repeat those questions for them real quick so that they can drop answers for the ones you have, and then you can answer their questions.
Of course. It's how has your business been affected by the pandemic, and what products and information would be useful to your company during these times?
Awesome. So yeah, if you have answers to those, we have some answers in there, but if you have some answers, please drop them in, and then I won't interrupt anymore to.
No, that's quite right. I just thought they were just taking it easy on me, Nathan. So that's not a problem.
Oh, I can't let them do that. We gotta get more in there.
No, that's all good. So just looking through closure statistics, what is again, number one, we've got in food and accommodation, it's ranked number one, arts and entertainments, but again, it's not really, the areas affected. I don't think there's any shocks in there, really. What is interesting to see at the moment is that, at the height of the pandemic we had in May, there was 23% of businesses were closed. When they last did this survey, 22% were closed in February. So it actually seems if at the moment that we're going higher again from October when it was 14%. And then, we also is looking at particular areas. You can see I recently went on a trip to New York, and, after living in Allentown, Pennsylvania, believe it or not, with the accent, that's where I live. But I think I was really shocked, and I think the stats really correlated that the amount of closures in New York was kind of drastically, higher than what we were experienced locally here. Even though Pennsylvania is in the list here, I hadn't really seen that massive impact in Allentown compared to New York. There was a lot of closures there in New York, but I think what we can safely say is that there has been, and there still is, a lot of business that got closed. They just necessarily haven't filed for bankruptcy, really. So I've lost a slide here, Nathan. Did I delete this from you? Did you go into my computer and delete it?
I did. I figured you're the tech guy.
It actually,
if I could do it, I would pull one over on you.
I was going to say that we did have a slide here, which was, you got your way in the end, Nathan.
I did, it's just the way it goes when you're the host.
I actually had a slide in here, which the next one was predictions for the future. And it was a crystal ball. And Nathan hated it. First of all, he hated it because it was just a slide with just an image on it. I wanted to use it as a talking point. My colleague other colleague I reviewed this content with, he didn't like it because it kind of gave the opinion of, we're not sure, it wasn't the nicest image to use. So you got your way, Nathan, but I'm also going to talk about it still. So the reason
before you jump into those predictions with that crystal ball and everything, your video has given us a little bit of trouble here. So you are now a very blurred figure rather than an actual person. So
okay,
we want to make sure that we can see your pretty smiling face.
Let me see what I can do there. Bear with me 1 second.
No problem.
Let me stop my video.
While you're doing that, I'll give a couple of the answers here if you want.
I'm back.
Oh, you're good now. All right.
I don't know why you did it faster than blurry.
Yeah, you went faster than I thought you could. So we'll let you go right into your predictions. Get the crystal ball out. Get the read the palms, whatever it takes, and let's see what you got.
Yeah, and I think the reason I put that crystal ball in there is I don't think anybody or the majority of people. I'm sure there was enough people making predictions out there who would have predicted that this was still going to be happening now, 15 months afterwards. I certainly can tell you when this first started happening, I didn't believe that the borders would be closed. I did think that this would be shorter than it is. So and there's a lot of companies out there who are really looking to make those predictions for the economy and things like that. With CreditSafe, we're not so focused on predicting an industry or a area. We're really more using that factual information of the bankruptcies and closures that we do know of to ensure that our ratings and limits are predictive still. We are, constantly changing our ratings and limits to reflect industries and areas affected, but based on factual information. We're not really going to be looking at saying this industry is going to boom. So from our point of view of our ratings and limits, they're still predictive. We're also looking at, when a company is behaving negatively or has negative behaviors, if it's paying late, if it's getting legal filings, if it's getting collection cases, those things are going to be updated on our reports, which will then clearly reflect in that credit limit. So where we might not predict a particular industry or be able to say, well, this industry is going to be bad or this area is going to continue and the number of failures going to continue, we're constantly building up that into our credit scoring and algorithms, really, so that when you come to use our products, you can rely on those, really. And I would say, what can you be doing really with regards to, in these times? I would say it's very important to continue to be diligent, to check, who you're dealing with. We are offering services, to enable you to do that. I think what Nathan's done plenty of other webinars around monitoring your companies, doing data health checks, COVID score, adjusting your credit policies, things like that. So if you're wondering what you should be doing, you should be doing all of those things. And I think a CreditSafe representative will be able to help you, but also, there are a lot of other companies out there who can offer these same services. So without doing the hard sell really there, I'm trying to avoid that.
Absolutely.
And that really comes down to the next one. We talked at the start of this is really kind of focused around the US. We will be doing an international presentation soon, so please look out for that. That will be coming up. What we're going to be also looking to do is try and produce a quarterly report and webinar, but I'm looking to your feedback now and I'm hoping that we can get some. So we can produce what you really want. And the other thing we are looking to do is is to try and put this data out there in an interactive dashboard. We're going to be using, a platform which would allow you to compare the states that you're dealing with, compare the industries. So those are the things that we have in the pipeline coming shortly. But I wanted to really gather people's feedback to see if there's anything that we've missed or anything else we could be doing better to provide you with, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for folks, if you don't know more about Richard's background or you missed the little intro there and everything, he is definitely the guy to be talking to here in regards to, what changes need to be made if you are a credit safe customer, or if you're not and you're looking at it, some things you'd like to see or like to be able to have or whatever. So it's a great chance to give any of your feedback. And we will be doing these things as we've matured with the webinars and the different things we're doing. Like Richard said, we've had a quarterly economic wrap up this year on just what's the state of business and what's going on in the economy. We've done quarterly credit manager wrap ups. So what's going on in the credit industry, what are credit managers specifically seeing? And then we also have this one coming up on the idea of what's the data showing in the trends of the scores, how are the health of businesses, and then also the closures and the bankruptcies and everything like that. So we're really trying to use and leverage that data that you guys get to use all the time to provide better content for our webinars, as well as some of the journal reports. Some of you may have seen our stuff on the grocery industry that we did during the pandemic, on the trucking industry during the pandemic, on manufacturing, all those different things that we put out as well. So any feedback you have on all that, it would be great as well. But let's, Richard, if you're ready, let's jump into the answers that we've gotten, and then some questions and some different things here. So what I'm seeing, and I'm going to kind of summarize it, and I know you can see it. I know not everybody in the audience can, but we definitely bankruptcies or closures being affected by small businesses. And I think we all know that small businesses were seriously hit during that. But it seems like several of our audience members, and I'm going to say they're probably a pretty predictive sample, have had issues with small businesses closing or not being able to keep up or not buying anymore, or those type of things.
An interesting fact here, Nathan, as well, is, and I didn't really want to put too much in this presentation because this was really about closures and bankruptcies. We've also seen a trend in the number of startups increasing since the pandemic, which is, you again would be slightly surprised by that. And I think I pay attention to these ones which are a bit more like, it goes against your natural instinct, really. You're like, well, nobody's opening a company during the pandemic. Well, a lot of people are, obviously, because they're diversifying. They're, all these people who are no longer employed in the entertainment or the, restaurants and things like that.
Yep.
They're going to find something to do. So there is a lot of people starting businesses and everything like that. So that I found very interesting as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's actually, if you look at economic history as an economics nerd and a guy who has spent most of his career in startups, the biggest and best and generally the most startups you will ever see are in economic downturns. So when the economy goes bad, people go out on their own, they do their thing. And some of the biggest companies, best companies, most world-renowned companies have come out of very bad economic times and all of that. So in the startup community, we're very excited to see what's coming out of it right now and what's going to happen over the next couple of years. And those companies that are going to change the world out of this pandemic.
I was wondering how many in 10 years time, big companies, and they'd be like, they started back in 2020 selling masks. Really.
That's right. So that's right. There's some surprising things that exactly that type of thing happens. So that'll be great to see. We've seen definitely folks are saying, they're seeing a recent drop in sales. Actually, one of the folks answered and said, sales were great last year, but then we burned through all the opportunities we had, made the best of them, and then there's not something refilling it. There's not new opportunities to seemingly refill. So sales kind of dipped and are now just barely starting to come back.
That might also coincide with the fact of, I believe the government support is slowing down, I guess. I don't know if that's played a factor in that. Again, sometimes hard when you haven't got hard facts there, but I do think that that's obviously worth mentioning as the PPP data, the Paycheck Protection Program, that was never meant to be long term. That was meant to keep people employed and, doors open for, a period of time. It wasn't meant to prevent companies going bankrupt. So as those kind of initiatives come to an end, I do think, I said I'm going to steer clear of predictions, but I do feel like that, based upon what we've seen previously, is we're going to continue to see bankruptcies or closures for a reasonable period of time here.
Sure. Well, I think you'd be in some decent economic company in that the Fed chairman Jerome Powell yesterday in his press conference said that exact same thing, that he expects to see just kind of a steady stream in that regard of companies that will either go bankrupt or close, and that that there's a lot of factors that'll do that, but that they'll do their best to try and stem that.
Yeah, and I said this goes back to what should you do if we believe that closures are going to continue, and it goes back to, like I said, being diligent, making sure you're dealing with people on the appropriate terms, make sure you know who you're dealing with, really, doing your background checks, etc. Really.
Absolutely. And that's actually one of the questions I have here is, how does due diligence come into, so understanding the data and stuff like that, I'm going to extrapolate here, but understanding the data, going through all the data and everything like that, how does that then play into whether or not this is a good customer to bring on, whether or not this is a customer we should keep, or should we change our terms with them or something like that?
I think that's where you need to kind of understand your own business. Each business is different. So you need to, I think, look at your own attitude to risk, and how much exposure this would give you, and then set a credit policy, based upon that, really. Who should you be giving credit to? What are your terms? That is, I think you've done a lovely webinar on that previously, Nathan. So a shameless plug there is to probably go listen to that one again, really.
We've done a few different webinars on those type of things, and we actually have some coming up that I'll talk about here at the very end that will help even more with that. So Richard, I mean, you're a data guy, you're a tech guy, you're doing all that. Are these folks that are here listening and they're seeing these trends, they're seeing what we're talking about? Is there any silver bullet in all of this? Is there a one piece of data that they should just, if you pay attention to this, you're going to get 80% of it right?
I would say, obviously looking at our dashboard on our own credit reports, you would say the things you're really going to be focusing on are the credit rating, credit limit, and DBT figures. They're going to really tell you on how a business is performing from our point of view. But I would also be taking advantage of our COVID scoring thing, which will allow you to do a portfolio check on where your companies are situated, from geographically and also from what industries, to kind of look at your exposure. I don't think there is a silver bullet is the fair answer, but I think that those are good starting points.
Okay. And do this for me. You've mentioned this a couple of times, and for folks that aren't super familiar with these two things, can you give me just a 30-second overview of the difference between the credit risk score that we have and then the COVID impact score?
Yeah, well, the credit risk score will be based upon that company's own attributes. So, it will be, this company is performing particularly well or performing particularly badly, and that will be a representation of it. The COVID scoring should be used in combination with the industry and location that company's in. So we've given a scoring on that company tied to certain attributes. So it would be, I'm pretty sure if it's got a poor COVID scoring and a poor credit rating, you really should be focusing on looking at those companies. If they're in a pretty, an industry, an area which are doing pretty well, and they're a good company, I wouldn't say don't look at those, because look at all your customers, but I would say you should be maybe looking at all the companies which are more in the sector, which is in, poor COVID score and poor credit score, really. So it's to be used in combination with that.
Right. Right. So,
and
I mean,
think
one
the
thing
easiest way is probably, like say, to listen to the webinar, because then you're going to get the visual representation of what we've done. And I think we're still providing that COVID scoring portfolio health checks. You just can fill in the form there, and you can get that performed on your whole portfolio.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. We've seen with the pandemic and things, some stuff has seemed to change, but at the end of the day, a company that is not performing and is not have a solid health of their company is not going to make it, or not going to do well one way or the other, no matter how much help they get, stimulus wise and everything.
Yeah. And I think that's the, if a company's bad, as in it's performing badly, just because it's in an area or industry which is potentially booming, yes, it's not going to make a difference. You still should be treating those with caution, really.
Right. And that's the biggest thing with these trends is there's some that's adjusting. Like you said, bankruptcies are down, but it doesn't mean that all the businesses are doing well. There's some other things that we have to factor in here. So that's been great. And Richard, it's been great to have you on. Thank you so much for bringing this stuff out and putting it out there. You've given us a ton of information, and there's going to be even more when that email comes out in the next, 24 to 48 business hours, folks. We'll have all this information, as well as links to these reports, to these press conferences, all this stuff that if you want to go and be like me and be an economics nerd that wants to jump into all this and learn all about these things, then you can go ahead and do that. Or if you just had some interesting points that came up or whatever, we'll drop those in there, and you can take a look for it on your own. So
I'm sending you the links as we speak.
There we go. I will have them soon, and we will get them out to you. And I want to thank all of you for being with us today. So it's been great to have all of you. Richard, thank you so much for all the great information and for joining me today. And
Thank you for having me.
Will see you all next time, folks. Have a great one.
Thank you.